Good evening and salam. I am Myriam Francois, a member of the Muslim Women's Art Fest Foundation team. I am delighted to welcome you to the Muslim Women's Art Festival. This evening, we are thrilled to host our second international event titled Muslim Women Writers Speak Out. And I'm delighted to introduce you to our host for this event, Dr. Claire Chambers, who is a professor of global literature at the University of York. Before I hand over to Dr. Chambers, I would like the audience to please follow the Muslim Women Arts Festival on our social media sites and share the news about the festival using the hashtag #SpreadHoney, And we dearly welcome donations as most of our events are free. Thank you, and over to you, Claire.
Thank you so much, Myriam, for that generous introduction, and to you and all the organisers of MACFEST, especially Qaisra Shahraz, for organising this inspiring event for International Women's Day. I'd also like to briefly explain who I am. So as you mentioned, I'm a professor of global literature at the University of York, and there I teach and research literature from the South Asian Muslim world, its diaspora, and to a lesser extent, the Perso-Arab world. And I just wanted to mention two of my books. There are a few, but I wrote this collection of essays entitled Rivers of Ink. And that came from my work as I do an occasional, well, a regular column for the Dawn newspaper in Pakistan. And also for International Women's Day, this is quite relevant. It's called A Match Made in Heaven. And it was an anthology that I edited of stories by writers of Muslim heritage, British Muslim heritage, writing about love and relationships. But that's enough about me. I want to talk now about the panel. So rather than reinforcing existing preconceived notions about what Muslim women are like, this panel is very diverse, and I think it will be stereotype busting. It intends to open up an understanding of the wide-ranging nature of these acclaimed artists, thinkers, and practitioners we have from around the world, their political concerns and creative techniques. Often presenters on panels at cultural festivals are very different from each other, and it's the job of chairs or moderators like me to find tenuous connections between them. So congratulations to MACFEST for putting together four people who, while they each have unique aspects, also have a lot in common. Not least among these shared aspects is the ways their stories will inspire you, particularly the women and girls in the audience. I'm not going to try to yoke them together where this doesn't fit, but both together and separately, I really want to discuss with these thinkers their diverse, exciting and nuanced bodies of work, both written and more activist-based. I should also say that it's a great pleasure to be here for International Women's Day, this 8th of March. But at intervals tonight, let's also spare a thought for the women of Ukraine. We're celebrating, but obviously many women don't have the liberty to do that, and they never expected to be in the position they found themselves in these last few weeks. And I think our honoured guest speaker, Charmin Bertles, is going to say a few words about this shortly. So the structure for today is I'm going to introduce our guest speaker, who I just mentioned, Charmaine, that we're absolutely delighted is here with us. And I'll ask her to say a few words. And then after that, the panel, I'll introduce the panel to you. I'll give a short introduction of each of our four women speakers. And after my short introduction, I'll ask they themselves to say a few words about their career path. And then I'll move on to the next speaker and so forth. And I should say that one of our speakers we're very excited that she can be with us today, which is Fawzia. And Fawzia Koofi needs no introduction, but she's so involved. She's a politician from Afghanistan. And so she's going to be probably dipping in and out because she also has another event. So we'll try to thread the words of Fawzia throughout this event as it becomes possible. So we're really excited about that. That's how the structure will be. Then after the introductions, I will try to conduct a conversation between the four speakers, and I've got shared questions and try to respond to what they're saying in a semi-structured fashion. And then Probably with 15 to 20 minutes before the end, I'll be opening up to your questions. So be thinking of things that you'd like to ask our speakers and take this opportunity. So without further ado, let me introduce our guest speaker. Charmin Bertos was educated at Fairfield High School for Girls, and after leaving there, she worked in the banking sector, specialising in faculty management for 28 years until she took early retirement in 1997. She was appointed as a magistrate in 1981 and remained so until 2013, after serving as chairman of the bench for 4 years. Having given 32 years service, she transferred to the supplemental list. She is the Greater Manchester patron of Marie Curie Nursing and also of a local hospice. She chairs the trustees at a number of charities which range in purpose from the eradication of modern-day slavery, helping older men to avoid social isolation, and raising funds for children and young people who are dealing with cancer. Charmin also sits on numerous charitable trusts. In 2017, she was appointed as Honorary Colonel of the Greater Manchester Army Cadet Force and is also a governor at her old school. Charmin became a Deputy Lieutenant of Greater Manchester in 2008 and was hugely privileged to serve as High Sheriff of the county in 2015 to 2016. And I hope Charmin will tell us a bit more about that, because it really is something quite special. In November 2020, she was extremely proud to be appointed as Vice Lord Lieutenant of Greater Manchester. And in 2022, she was delighted to be awarded for an MBE for services to charity and the community in Greater Manchester. Charmin lives with her husband in Tameside. She's an animal lover and her interests include local theatre and local history. When time permits, she enjoys reading, walking, dining with friends and watching Manchester United. So thank you very much, and over to you, Charmin.
I believe you're still muted.
Sorry about that. I was just saying I'm delighted to be sharing this evening with you, particularly on International Women's Day. As Claire has just said, I would like to just take a moment to say to all of us that we need to remember the women of Ukraine who, whilst we're celebrating International Women's Day today, they perhaps have more important things on their mind right now. And I think each and every one of us needs to keep them in our hearts and our prayers, that they come through this horrible, horrible time safely, and that their loved ones come back to them also. So please, all of us, keep in mind the people of Ukraine, particularly the women. But back to our event, as I said, I'm delighted to be here. I think Claire wants me to tell you a little bit about my roles, that of High Sheriff, which was, as she said, in 2015-16, the High Sheriff of a county. Every area of this country, every county has a High Sheriff, and they are the titular head of the legal system within that county. It's very much it's not a true role in the sense that it is in image only, but part of the High Sheriff's role is to look after all aspects of law within that county. So we spend time with the judges, the police, all the blue light services, and it's a most interesting time. You serve as High Sheriff for 1 year, and I absolutely love my time meeting such a huge range of people. The role I currently have is that of Vice Lord Lieutenant. Those of you that may not know, again, every county in the country has a Lord Lieutenant who is immediately the Queen's representative. That means that he takes her part within the county, he or she. There are female Lord Lieutenants, and we represent Her Majesty in all aspects of life, and we try and ensure that we promote the Queen's philosophy in life and the care that she has for the communities. So our Lord Lieutenant in Greater Manchester is a wonderful chap called Sir Warren Smith. And he has a number of deputies, but he has one Vice Lord Lieutenant, and that is me. So I, in turn, represent the Lord Lieutenant, who is representing Her Majesty. So it's a fabulous role to have. It's a great honour. And apart from meeting members of the royal family when they come to this county, part of my role is to look after all sorts of voluntary groups from every sector you can imagine. So to be with MACFEST, which is an organisation that has come on leaps and bounds in Greater Manchester, they have done, in the name of Qaisra, they've done a wonderful job in spreading the joy and the pleasure of meeting with women of similar minds, of different cultures, but of similar minds, and spending time chatting about all sorts of things. So I'm delighted to be here. I'm particularly looking forward to listening to the four ladies who are here to tell us about their particular cultures and the books that they've written and everything else. And today of all days, we need to applaud women's achievements and shine a light on inspiring women. And I am certain I am in the company of inspiring women. I am the odd one out here. I haven't written a book. I have been the subject of one, but I haven't written one. So I'm delighted to sit back and listen to you. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you so much, Sharman. That's wonderful. And I'm so delighted that Fawzia is here. And I think I will introduce you first, Fawzia, because I am aware that you may have to dip in and out of this meeting. Really, you need no introduction. Fawzia Koofi is a politician and a women's rights activist from Afghanistan. Originally from Badakhshan province, Fawzia was recently a member of the Afghan delegation negotiating peace with the Taliban in Doha, Qatar. She is an ex-member of parliament in Kabul and was the vice president of the National Assembly. And Fawzia's New York Times bestseller, The Favoured Daughter, is the true and inspiring story of how one Afghani woman overcame poverty and prejudice to become the first female speaker of the Afghan parliament and a leading contender for president. So welcome, Fawzia. And could I just ask you just maybe to give us a few words about your work and about the book?
Thank you, Dr. Claire. It's such a pleasure to be in this wonderful platform in this important day. For many people around the world, probably International Women's Day, the day of solidarity of women, the day of highlighting their strength, their resilience, their determination does not have any meaning anymore. But for most of us who come from a very difficult backgrounds, from a background of who have experienced oppression, deprivation, victim of all forms of violence and exclusion. It means the International Women's Day means a lot. It means highlighting our struggles. It means highlighting our unity and highlighting our solidarity. So I would like to congratulate everyone. When I actually, Dr. Claire, when I woke up this morning in the UK with no country, no identity, not being able to do things that I was usually doing in International Women's Day, and representing a country and people that its women are no longer allowed to get out of their houses, it was personally a very, very difficult day. And I wasn't sure how to shape my day, because while I was attending in different virtual speeches, I was giving speeches to different parliaments, different platforms, including this wonderful platform. I wanted to remember my origin. I wanted to remember the fact that I'm representing a group of a nation that is extremely oppressed, that it's women, the 55% of their society are deprived of their basic rights. And unfortunately, the military extremists do this under the name of my religion. They misrepresent my religion. they misinterpret, they weaponize it. My religion, Islam, is about acceptance, about coexistence, about peace, about enlightenment. While the Taliban actually deprive women of my country from education, which is the basic fundamental rights of any human being, also within Islamic values. They deprive women from going to school, working in the offices, participating in any political, social spheres of the community. I was trying to remember that I'm representing them and that is my origin. So it was extremely frustrating. It was a frustrating day to see that women in Afghanistan cannot celebrate this day. And that's why I was not sure how to start it. Initially, I said, maybe I should put all my social media account black while we do plan a march in Afghanistan in 2 days' time, and I was organizing that as well. But I just said, maybe in protest, what's happening to me, to my sisters in Afghanistan, and to any woman around the world, especially also in light of the Ukraine conflict. I just put it black. But then I thought maybe a lot of women and girls around the world, and especially in my country, are inspired by what we do and what we say. Maybe they look at us and they get their hope. So I should not disappoint them. And therefore, I put a poem in my social media. I said, the spring will come, the flowers will bloom again. I will continue to sing the song of freedom again and again. And by singing this, sorry, I got emotional, but by putting this in my social media, I wanted to give a hope to my people, to the woman, that this too shall pass. What we are experiencing will also pass.
Thank you so much for sharing.
It has been a very emotional day. Anyways, I think if women, peace and security is taken serious, if Security Council Resolution 1325 was really meaningfully implemented and taken serious by countries around the world, and if women were given a role to be part of political and social spheres meaningfully, we could have avoided many conflicts. And I'm telling this from my own experience of being in the negotiation with the Taliban. There were 4 women in the negotiation with Taliban. I was one of them. We have tried really to do everything to demonstrate a different Afghanistan, an Afghanistan that with a moderate definition of Islam could live in peace and harmony with itself and in peace and harmony with the rest of the world. But I knew that how much religion and misperception was used as a weapon, as an instrument, just for power, to get to power, not truly to fight for religion, but as a means of power. So I think in this eve of 8 March and on the day of 8 March, we need to really advocate for women's engagement, meaningful participation in the areas which is not comfort zone. We are always happy with our comfort zones and we are satisfied. I think it's for us, for women also, to get out of our comfort zones and to enter the no entry zones, which is women, peace and security. Thank you.
Thank you so much. That was so eloquent and really touches on a lot of the things we've wanted to talk about today. So next I'll introduce Dr. Myriam Francois, who's a journalist, filmmaker and writer. Her work focuses primarily on topics related to France, Islam and the Middle East and can be found in print, radio, commentary, radio documentary and TV documentary formats. Throughout her career, she's worked with some of the most prominent broadcasters, including the BBC, Channel 4 and Al Jazeera. So Myriam, please could you also say a few words about your work and maybe what International Women's Day means to you?
Thanks very much, Claire, and thank you so much, Fawzia and Charmaine, for your reflections just prior to that. Like such a vital reminder that for all of the celebratory mood that we tend to have around International Women's Day, that every year it's like that bittersweet also reminder of just how many women are still struggling for such basic rights, and that we even have to make an argument for those rights. And I think that's something that, you know, I was recently interviewing Professor Anne Phillips, who's written a book about equality, and you know, she makes a point in that book which I think is really relevant to this conversation, which is that she actually thinks that we debase the value of equality when we try and essentially argue that it's similarity, like biological similarity, that makes us worthy of equal rights. You know, we're humans like men are, you know, so we should have the same rights as men do. And that also applies in the conversation on race, you know, and her point is that equality is a given. We don't have to argue, we don't have to make an argument for our dignity. We don't have to make an argument for equal rights. That is inherent to, that is an inherent right that we are born with, and the justification, the argument is on those who try and remove it from us. And so all this energy that we expend trying to prove to people that we should be entitled to the same rights, you know, I wish that we lived in a world where we could flip that on its head and just say, no, it's up to you to prove to me why I'm not worthy of the same rights as you. You prove to me why I'm the one that should have to justify my humanity. And that underlying basis of inequality, which can be found across gender, across race, and across all sorts of different divisions within our society, to me speaks to a sort of continuing entitlement in not just men, obviously not all men, but certainly significantly enough men for it to be a situation where in 2022, we're still talking about women being able to leave their houses without fearing for their lives, that women should be allowed to participate in the running of their own country, to decide what happens to their children, to decide what happens to their bodies, to decide whether they are entitled to do certain jobs, to receive equal pay for the same jobs. So anyway, I could go on, but I know there's many other speakers who will have lots of really important contributions to make, and I just want to salute you all, and very happy to be stood with you sisters on this important day, which allows us really to come together in a way that sadly we don't get very many occasions to do, and regroup. You know, the freedom of all people is only as good as the least free human. And currently it seems we've still got a lot of way to go on that one. So thank you.
Thank you, Miriam. And now I'll introduce Wardah Abbas, who's a lawyer, writer and women's activist based in Nigeria. She's the founder and editor-in-chief of the Muslim Women Times, an independent media platform centering the stories and experiences of Muslim women. She writes about gender, culture, equality in Islam for Medium, and has also published essays across journals, magazines and media platforms. Moreover, Wardah has appeared as a guest speaker in several conferences, seminars and podcasts. Her story, Radical Muslim in Love, was published by Penguin Random House in the anthology The Ordinary Chaos of Being Human. And when she's not writing, bonding with friends and cuddling up with a book, you can find her running around with her 4-year-old son. So over to you, Wardah, for just a few words again about your work and maybe International Women's Day.
Thank you very much, Dr. Claire. I feel so blessed to be in the midst of such lovely, powerful, trailblazing women. And when we talk about International Women's Day or Women's History Month, I sometimes wish it wasn't a day where we have to talk about our pains, our struggles as women. I wish it was a day where we could all sit and remember our struggles of how we got to equality, but we are really, really far from there right now. So I personally don't feel like it's a day to celebrate. I feel like it's a day to speak up, to have conversations about the many issues bedeviling women around the world. I feel like it's a day where we need to rant, we need to get angry. Because, for example, in Nigeria, we have the Ninth National Assembly deciding, which is actually made up of, I think, 95.9% of men, actually deciding to deny citizenship of foreign-born husbands of Nigerian women. And they also decided to deny women the ability to take indigenship of their husband's state after about 5 years of being married. They also denied women about 35% affirmative action in the party administration and leadership. They also denied specific seats for women in the National Assembly. And I feel like this is not something that is happening in Nigeria, although we have different issues affecting women across the world. What I can speak about for Nigerian women is not what another woman is going through in another part of the world. But I feel like as a collective, it is a time to raise our voices. It's not a time to sit and celebrate and play by the rules and gloss over the struggles of women around the world. It's a time to raise our voices. It's a time to tell the world, tell countries, tell organizations to stop paying lip service to the position, to the status of women around the world. It's a time to tell them to start acting on it. We have so much potential. We are half of humanity. It's a time to tell them to, to show that they are serious about giving us equal rights as human beings, as equal human beings. It's not a time for us to sit down and have tea and, have parties and congratulate one another about being women or being worthy of equality or justice or whatever is out there, because the reality is we are very far from where we ought to be right now, and we just have to keep talking about it. Yeah. So I would just like to pass the mic on to another speaker.
Thank you so much, Wardah. That's wonderful, really eloquent. And as you say, women from around the world, and we are blessed to have you and also Fawzia from Afghanistan, all these diverse voices. So it's really interesting to hear what you're saying. And last, but by no means least, I want to introduce Kubra Gumasay, who was born in Hamburg in 1988. She studied political science in Hamburg and London, and is the author of the best-selling book Sprache und Sein, to be published in English in May 2022 at Profile Books under the title Speaking and Being, How Language Binds and Frees Us. Kubra is founder of several award-winning campaigns and associations, such as the campaign Schauhin against racism and the Feminist Alliance #Ausnahmslos, for which she was awarded the Clara Zetkin Prize for Women. Most recently, Eden, a feminist co-creation space in Hamburg, selected as Kultur- und Kreativpiloten Deutschland in 2019, and Future S, a feminist research and advocacy organisation for desirable futures. In 2018, Forbes magazine selected her as one of 30 under 30 in Europe. As a Mercator Senior Fellow, she is currently a Fellow at Centre for Research in the Arts, Social Sciences and Humanities, or CRASH, and the Leverhulme Centre for the Future of Intelligence, both at Cambridge University. So thank you, Kubra, and some opening remarks from you as well, please.
Thank you so much for allowing me to be part of this wonderful panel and to hear all those beautiful perspectives shared. And I've had many conversations today on this topic, and being surrounded by women from different parts of the world has a very empowering element to it, because Claire, you mentioned one of the campaigns we started, Ausnahmslos. By the way, I'm very impressed by how well you managed to pronunciate all those German titles.
I did it at school, I'm happy to say.
So Ausnahmslos was a campaign we started after you might remember have followed it after 2015, 2016 New Year's Eve, when in Cologne there was an event of extreme sexualized violence against women at Cologne airport and at Cologne station, and dozens and dozens of women were sexually harassed and abused, and it was mainly put on refugees, male refugees, and a very legitimate and important debate on sexualized violence started, unfortunately though, mainly framed as an imported product by immigrants and seen as sort of foreign problem. And then and then all of a sudden, all these men who have never been seen at the forefront of any feminist notion, all of a sudden turned out to be very eager on this topic. But it was because the racism in this was not really highlighted. So we started a campaign against sexualized violence, but also against racism, because it should be possible to talk about this without feeding into racist narratives, without glossing over problems. And we wanted to create this space where this was possible. And because the whole world was basically watching closely what was happening in Germany as a country that sort of opened its borders, which never happened, but that was a very dominant narrative, there was a lot of attention on this, and this unfortunate, this also sort of was seen as, well, you've been too naive with refugees and immigrants, blah, blah, blah. And so we started this campaign, and internationally we received a lot of support. And the reason why I wanted to share this is one of the emails I got ended with "in solidarity." And I teared up when I read that, because I realized oftentimes when you, in one way or another, try to highlight and visualize and materialize a structure that is oppressive, a form of opinion, a dominion that is oppressive, but not visible to everyone, because it has different faces depending on who you are, what kind of group you're associated with, or what kind of identity you are put into. You have so many resources you use to actually prove that there is a structure and that you're not insane by trying to state the obvious. And I forgot which writer it was, but a feminist writer said, there is an extreme amount of strength when women validate each other's experience. And so is solidarity. And to see it, or hear it rather, spoken out, and say, I stand in solidarity with you, it again brought so much power. And today, this morning, I was asked the same question: what does International Women's Day to you? On all these days, we do our fights, and sometimes collectively, sometimes individually. But today, to me, has the celebratory element, because I know I'm not alone, and I know we're not alone. And having all these perspectives shared now from around the world even enforces that and shows us that being hopeful is not naive, and that we are strong. And as many have stated today, we are many, and actually more than half. So it gives me a lot of hope and strength, and hopefully something we can feed off all the other days, the 364 other days of the year, where we keep on fighting.
Thank you so much to all the speakers for such a rousing beginning to this session. And I'd like to start where you left off, Kubra. I really liked what you were saying about, the Cologne incident, and, that racism was getting forgotten, and how you wanted to, it's possible to believe two things at once, to be against sexual violence, but also against racism. So let me ask all of you about feminism and about what Wardah's countrywoman, the writer Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie, has said about the danger of a single story. sometimes feminism can be a bit single issue and emphasizing just women over everything else. So I wonder how it's possible to do what Kubra was doing, what you're all doing. I think it's sort of intersectional approach in the way that you're going about your quest for women's rights, if that makes sense. I don't know who wants to leap in, but I'd really like to hear your thoughts about feminism and keeping different issues and different types of oppression, combating them both at the same time. Maybe Miriam or Kubra, since.
Yeah, I just couldn't stand no one unmuting their
Thank you.
microphones. I think once you open your eyes, once the wheel is lifted, you cannot unsee that there is injustice and that this is structural, that it's not an exception, but more the rule. And then I think if you really want to get at the root of a problem, you will see that there are many other forms of oppression that feed each other, and that it is crucial to stand not only in solidarity with those who fight against sexism, but also other forms of oppression, because only that will be sustainable. And when I talk about oppression, I wouldn't only include humans, but also the oppression of nature. When I wrote my book, Speaking and Being, I wanted to really understand what is at the core of it. And there are many things at the core of it, but one of the things that I found because speaking on voices and the Muslim women speaking out, at the core of it, it might sound, well, I don't know, I'll just say it, it's lack of humbleness. It's lack of humbleness of those who universalize a male perspective on the world. It's lack of humbleness who universalize a white perspective on the world. It is lack of humbleness of those who universalize a human perspective on the world, oppressing all other perspectives, claiming to have the absolute truth, claiming to have objectivity, neutrality, when they in fact have not, when a very limited worldview becomes the worldview. And when you oppose that, you cannot only try and add to it, you have to create a world where people don't even have to fight against dominion and the oppression of their view. But what we should aim for is a society where, as Simone Weil would put it, where there's attention to the consequences of our actions, attention to what our words cause, what our consumption causes, what our behavior causes, attention to understand that it's not about our intentions, our will, but it's about paying attention to our presence in this world. And all of these forms of oppression are interlinked, and you cannot handle any of those individually and then have a sustainable solution for it. We have to look how they interlink, how they enforce one another, and then envision worlds and rooms and groups and publics where we try and find out how living together in harmony, not despite but with our differences, is possible.
I'm really glad you brought that up about the human perspective, because that often gets forgotten, and we've passed some really awful milestones, you know, with climate change recently. I mean, this emergency that we're in, it's a very salient warning. And I'm very interested to know what other people think about, you know, about trying to diversify beyond a single narrative about women. So Fawzia or Miriam or Wardah.
Yeah, I mean, I think we are living in a world where many things are about perceptions. So for instance, if you are in my part of the world, if you're coming from the developing country, the perception of those, you know, women or men, and sometimes even women, towards the Western woman would be that that the Western women are probably too progressive, they're too open, no longer sticking to their values. And when you come to West, you will constantly meet people that have a view that, you know, women in Muslim community or Muslim women or women in East part of the world, they are less progressive, they are not trying their best, they are not educated in many cases. And so, which neither of these views are true. And so therefore, I think, you know, our role in, especially with the growth of technology and the world becoming a global village, and also, you know, after the COVID with this kind of online meetings and virtual connectivity, I think it's our role now to kind of make these different values friends to each other's, or unite with each other, because we're living in a world where, like, our future is shaped by our differences, unfortunately. And the perception we have towards each other is always very extreme. And so we women play an important role in shaping the perceptions and the perspective. And that's why I think we have to really use our platform to see where we can find a common ground. Common ground is not always sexy. It is not very interesting. It is not, you know, sharp. Because we're talking about a moderate world, moderate from many angles, be it religious belief, we want a moderate definition. If it's you know, our social approach, we want a moderate approach. And moderation is not always very sharp, not always, you know, to the interest of many, because people want extreme. So therefore, I think we have a long battle to make these moderate views friend with each other, I think.
That's great. Yes, it's so true. Miriam, what are your thoughts?
I was just going to touch on a few things that have been said, but I guess first of all, the reality is that the feminist movement has always been a broad church. You know, Black and brown women have always been part of the movement. It's just their participation has often been obscured, and in some cases not raised to the level of the voices of white feminists. And that obviously is a reflection of a wider imbalance in the world, where, you know, European voices are given preeminence in most conversations, and including within the feminist conversation. And really the contributions that, you know, Black and brown feminists, wherever they're from in the world, make to the feminist movement is really that of the need to recognize that the feminist movements take so many different forms. But as Kubra points out, there are some very similar structures that we're all combating, that we're all fighting. It's like when you look at, there isn't really a society in the world where it seems that unless there are some form of, in many cases, very much legal or moral constraints placed on men's behavior, that women, children, and nature tend to pay quite a high price for that. And that's something that men really, in my opinion, need to reflect quite profoundly on, actually. And your point about nature, we've talked about it, just to make this last point and hand on to Wardah, but I don't think it's a coincidence that historically women have been considered in a way closer to nature. You know, men would sort of identified themselves as sort of being rational and more detached from nature, but women, because of the fact that we bleed and the fact that we give birth, we are somehow closer to nature. And the denigration of the natural world, which in many ways has been seen symbolically as, you know, Mother Earth, the giving, the feminine energy of this world, is an energy that's not just been taken for granted, but it's been consumed, exploited, destroyed without any regard for the balance, the delicate balance that exists in the world. And gender balance the imbalance we see in the gender world is, in my view, part of the wider imbalance that we're talking about. It's the core issue is an issue of imbalance, and gender is just one part of that puzzle. And so just finally, for to speak to your point about kind of the recognition of the intersection of different struggles, to me, feminism is one part of the struggle to return to that balance, or what we would Muslims has called mizan, like the divine balance that existed, that we as humans are made to maintain, and which when we see as imbalance, we have to reflect on the causes. And in my opinion, I think the hyper-patriarchal European patriarchy, Euro-patriarchal outlook has, to quote Mina Salami, the feminist, has caused untold damage to our planet. And so it's unpicking that, which is essential. And unpicking Euro-patriarchy, you both unpick historically bound, like colonially bound forms of imbalance, but also the gender imbalances that have been linked to that. I'll hand the baton on to Wardah. I'm sure you have many points to make.
I'm sure you do, Wardah. So yeah, we'd love to hear from you too about this whole issue of having more than one struggle at a time, the gender struggle, but other struggles. And maybe I mentioned Adichie's idea of the single story, that might be of interest, or just take it in any direction you want. You're on mute, sorry. Wardah, you're on mute. That's great.
Oh, sorry about that. So I actually don't know where to start from. There is a lot to talk about. Okay, so I feel like my own idea of feminism is women recognizing that women have different realities out there. We have multiple layers of oppression enveloping us and coming in different forms. So for example, I am a Black African Muslim woman. I have issues of culture, of religion, of racism, and we have specific issues different from all other women. And I think that's the beauty of intersectional feminism, which is recognizing that our realities are different as women around the world. And one of the issues I realized when it comes to Muslim women was the fact that we don't have enough outlets for us to put our voices out there, for us to speak out, for us to talk about the issues bedeviling us as Muslim women. We have, on the one hand, people who believe that Muslim women do not have any rights, and that we, by virtue of the fact that we are Muslim women, we are naturally oppressed and that we are controlled by our men. And on the other hand, we have the conservative side that believes that our place is, just to not be seen and to not be heard. And it was one of the reasons why I decided to start the Muslim Women Times, which is a media platform centering the stories and experiences of Muslim women. And what I had in mind at the time was for it to be a platform where women can share their stories unfiltered and without fear of being abused or fear of judgment and all. But I also realized that even amongst Muslim women, we have those who believe that what we are doing, I feel like some believe it's not yet the right time to be doing what we are doing. They believe it's too much. And I feel like that's the essence, because when people are not ready for the kind of work we are doing, then it means it's the right time to do that kind of work. And so I feel feminism is basically recognizing that women are human beings and we should have the right to choose how we want to live our lives, and we should try as much as possible to break the barriers that are keeping us down, that are keeping us from achieving our full potential as human beings. And so when I started the Muslim Women Times, I reached out to a lot of Muslim women who I believe were passionate about the rights and the agency of Muslim women. But I feel like a lot of people are out there, they are angry, they want things to change, but they are not quite ready to do the work. I actually got 2 dedicated sisters and we started it, I think in November 2020. There have been a lot of challenges. There have been so many hurdles to cross, and we could sense the reluctance on the part of a lot of Muslim men out there, but we have hope that in the next few years, a lot of people will come around to recognize the work that we are doing, and they would also want to be a part of it and come on board.
Thank you so much. So a follow-up question for you is about the International Women's Day 2022 campaign theme, and this is for all of the panel speakers. This year's theme is #BreakTheBias. So let me just read you what the International Women's Day organisers have written. So they say, imagine a gender-equal world, a world free of bias, stereotypes and discrimination, a world that is diverse, equitable and inclusive, a world where difference is valued and celebrated. Together we can forge women's equality. Collectively we can all #BreakTheBias. And I think that speaks, you were just talking about breaking the barriers just now, Wardah. So I'd just like to ask all of you what your thoughts are on this theme, and especially on bias and discrimination.
Yeah, like I said,
what are you saying? Sorry, Wardah, please speak.
Yeah, like I highlighted earlier, I talked about different barriers keeping women from living their lives to their full potentials. I talked about the barriers like culture, like religion, like classism, like racism. And we have women who only have to deal with just 1 or 2 of these barriers. And then we have women who have to deal with a whole lot of these barriers. Like they are wrapped in multiple layers of these barriers. We have women who are what's the word I'm looking for? They are kept back by virtue of their skin color, by virtue of their culture, their religion, and it's very hard for them to try to crawl out or try to break these barriers, for them to, some women have the will to, try to say no to all these multiple layers of oppression, but they find it very difficult. And I feel like we women have a lot of work to do in this area, because there is a situation where when we cannot relate to the struggles of another woman, we are likely to invalidate their experiences, invalidate their struggles, and not recognize that there are women going through entirely different things from what others are going through. And it makes it more difficult for us to achieve equality as our desired status as women on a collective level. And so when it comes to breaking barriers, I believe it's a call on all women to first of all recognize our differences as women, and to recognize that by virtue of these differences, we have different struggles and we have different realities, and we should all come together to help one another to try to break these barriers, to try to, even if we cannot relate to what another woman is going through, we do not have to, force our own opinions of what liberation means to the other woman to force our own opinions of what liberation means to us and another woman. We should try to listen to what other women have to say. We should try to understand where they're coming from, to understand their their reality. We don't necessarily have to agree with their own point of view or with their own perspective, but we should just, try to accept that we do not think the same way. We do not necessarily have the same thought process. We do not necessarily want the same things as women. And I think that's the first step to helping women around the world break the barriers that keep them down as women.
That's great.
And I think it's a very important thing to reflect upon on International Women's Day.
Mm-hmm. That's really wonderful start. So would others of you like to speak to this theme of break the bias?
I'll jump in if it's all right, just because it slightly got my back up, the idea of break the bias, if I'm honest, because I think that reducing what, women's experience of patriarchal violence to bias is like dismissing it to, men are hurting our feelings. Fawzia can speak very directly to the fact that it's not Afghan women's feelings that are being hurt here. We're talking about very real structural forms of violence against women. We're talking about women being, if we want to, from women in Afghanistan to women in Yemen who are, facing wars and always on the harsh side of, however harsh a war is, it's always women and children experiencing the harshest end of it. And to the UK with Sarah Everard, showing us that, women are not safe, not just out on the streets, but not safe from the very officers meant to be protecting us. It's not, bias is annoying, bias is frustrating, bias is I would call like a form of moral rudeness. But what I personally feel is really important actually for the feminist struggle is structural change. And what I mean by structural change is the sorts of legal and structural changes that will actually change the realities of women's lives, regardless of how men might think about us. So men can have as many biases as they like, but if the system says that when you have a child, you have to provide 50% for that child going forward, there is no way for you to escape that. If the law says that women can go to school, go to work, have their own careers, have their own lives, are fully constituted with their legal rights, then it doesn't really matter in many ways what biases some men may have, because ultimately the system will be there to protect it. And I think when I say the system, it can sound quite abstract, but I think it's really important to point out that the form of capitalism that we live in today, in my opinion, is a form of violence. It's a form of violence that, for example, if you look at, I'll speak to the UK, which is where I currently live, you currently need a two-parent household with two working parents to be able to live, except childcare is really expensive. So who is it who usually has to stay at home and look after the children? Well, it's usually the woman, and that has then implications for her future, her career, her personal ambitions. I mean, these are all knock-on effects from a wider economic system in which we find ourselves. Wars are arguably the product of the capitalist system that we find ourselves in, if you follow the money. So just to say, bias is frustrating, it shouldn't exist, but it's structural change, not, let's make men nicer, that, I'm personally looking for.
I'm really glad you said that, Miriam, and it's why I asked the question after the single issue question, and it was why I was so glad that Wardah used the language break the barriers rather than break the bias. It's a similar word, but it's much more structural. And since you mentioned Fawzia, I wonder if you have a bit more to say about this issue.
Well, I think there is a sense of satisfaction also among the women. I think as long as we have an office and a computer and an income or a job, we are satisfied, and there is no sense of revolution and change anymore, where this International Women's Day is marked for. I remember, throughout our history, we read that even for women to have the right to vote in the UK, they had to stand for days and nights in queue to be able to have the right to vote. So freedom doesn't come with just, with no cost. There is a cost when you actually stand for freedom and liberation. First of all, I think we have to really define what is our definition of liberation and what is our definition of discrimination-free environment. It's so different from where I live, where women are struggling for their basic rights, the rights to education. Can you believe it? I mean, I don't want to get, once again, emotional, because I have been part of all of this so much. I have built schools, I have helped teachers, female teachers get hired, I have, supported girls' education, I have put gender budgeting in the budget. All of this to see, collapse and start from scratch is on a personal level also heartbreaking. But look at my part of the world where women are struggling to go to school, but they push them back and they want them to wear burqa, which is not even Islamic. It's cultural in some part of Afghanistan. So can you imagine, for women, their definition of liberation is just get out of that burqa and be able to go to school, be able to go to work, be able to have an income, because over the wars, many women actually lost the breadwinners of their family. They have lost their husband, they have lost so war is not only taking lives, but it's also taking opportunities. And that's why when there is a war, in the case of Ukraine, in the case of Yemen, Syria, many countries in conflict, the first group of society that are victim are the women. So when there is war, we are victimized in a different way. When there is the so-called stability, they take opportunities from us. So therefore, I think that sense of revolution should come back, because we are happy with our comfort zones, as I mentioned before. We are happy with our, job, office, and we have become, and our issues are so localized, I would say. So there is no, we need to create that moment where women across the world could stand with common values and stand with a sense of revolution and think that, no matter what happened in Afghanistan, it's miles, thousands of miles away, it is going to impact me in this part of the world. Because if discrimination becomes a norm, it doesn't know any border. It will reach to any border. If women are excluded from their basic rights, we are not talking even about the rights to choose to wear which kind of color of clothes or outfit, etc. We're talking about the right to education, the right to work, the right to be able to talk in public. We're talking about these basic rights. If women are deprived from that in that part of the world, it can endanger our security, because women participation in peace and security is a matter of national security. It's no longer just a social political issue. It is a matter of security, because, and I have been giving justification the whole day, because I was talking in so many conferences, I was giving justification that if there is a government anywhere, if the policies and the structures are exclusionary and radicalized, that radicalized exclusionary government could pave the way for more radicalization and could endanger the world's security. So when the governments become radicalized, they try to oppress the female gender of their society or the minorities. And therefore, I think we should really avoid governments use our leverage, push them not to, normalize discrimination, because it's not only women, but it's a matter of national security. And that's why I think our governments, we need to do everything to ensure that our governments are alerted, that they take action, that they don't become just, somebody who watches the situation, and that women problem around the world is each and every one of us problem. Yes, if women in the UK have different problems, if the police is not protecting them, I see that as a matter of my own issue, because I think somewhere in this struggle something went wrong, that we were not able to bring that level of awareness and accountability where the police doesn't take care of their female citizens. So therefore I think we have to really unite, because there is an invisible power in unity. We need to unite, and we need to think that every problem of any woman in the world is my problem. So we have to stand in the face of justice and in the face of discrimination-free world.
It's extremely powerful and hard to follow, but I'm going to ask Kubra to try anyway. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Fawzia. And I would just like to add, when you said that when you were trying to show why what happens in Afghanistan is relevant for women in the West, I mean, last but not least, our governments are responsible for what's happening there. We sent tanks there. We invested in the army there, the military there. We are part of this conflict, and just because it's miles and miles away, it is not dissociated from our structures. The other day, we had a work in progress seminar here at the university, and a philosopher was analysing Hannah Arendt's analysis of the Eichmann process, following the Holocaust, and she was advocating for that it should be possible for us to reach some sense of consciousness by thinking, by attention, by understanding the connectedness, the consequences of the systems we're living in. And whatever we are having as privileges here in the West is based on exploitation elsewhere in the world. So this is why intersectionality is important. This is why understanding the interconnectedness of conflicts is important. And this is why it is also our responsibility, because our comfort has caused other people pain and their death. And it is, I think if we look back on today in 50 years' time, it will be so obvious. I mean, in Europe, we live in safety, relative safety. I mean, even the conflict in Ukraine, the fact that this was seen as like horrendous and like, oh, first time, blah, 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 blah. I mean, all these other wars have been going on and our militaries have been involved in this. It just, obviously, those bodies didn't matter as much as they do now. But, just to look, a few months prior to this, people were still drowning in the Mediterranean at our borders. We have shielded ourselves through various borders, whether it's actually physical or built on narratives, built on a pseudo-moral high ground that doesn't really exist, where our governments have shown a different face to us, but a different face to the to countries they've been exploiting. And it's also important to, I think, highlight that in international politics. So, when you were talking about breaking barriers, Wardah, I was very much reminded of how oftentimes women are like in empowerment seminars that are not as critical as they should be, where women are encouraged to behave like men and basically adapting to a way of habitus, a way of being, a way of communicating, behaving that is destructive. And then, but they set the norm, they set the structure. So we basically adhere to that kind of structure to make our way within it. But sometimes, as Miriam has said, not sometimes, almost all times, it needs structural change, because it shouldn't be left up to the goodwill of some people to, live a more just life with one another, but it should be the norm, and the exception should be those who do not want to adhere to that. And in the international community, on that level of diplomacy, we see how now all of those voices who've been advocating for disarmament, for diplomacy in a more conscious of colonialization, capitalism, exploitation, gendered and gender and racial injustice, are now being called as seen as too naive or not strong enough, because in times of war we need again this patriarchal approach to how to deal with conflicts on the scale. But this is what has gotten us into the conflict in the first place. And by investing more money into it, by investing more resources into it, we're not going to get out of that. And this is why it's so important to, as women or people who oppose all of these forms of dominion and oppression have to invest resources into visualizing how an alternative world could look like, because opposing the current world as it is will not get us to a more just world. It is by also investing resources into exploring a more just world.
Can I just jump in really quickly with the idea of domination, which I feel like we haven't really talked about that much, but seems to me like if we want to talk about the common trait running through patriarchal oppression, doesn't matter where you look in the world, domination is at the core of it. And it seems to be a distinctly, if we were going to talk about distinctive traits of sort of patriarchal frameworks, it's domination of nature, domination of women, of children, but also war as an act of domination. And so I'm just wondering, just to pick up and, you're talking about solutions, like another world is possible. Like, is there a dominant list or is there an alternative model to like Euro-patriarchal dominance, which is almost accepted as like the natural and default way that we have to operate? Oh, that's just how it is, but actually, is it the only way that we can operate in the world? Is it that, that the idea of the sort of almost like Darwinian survival of the fittest concept, which really is rooted in dominance, in the idea that men's physical superior strength, by and large, entitles them to be in positions of all forms of power? Is that a premise we are sort of, in my opinion, that we sort of accept globally, and from which all other forms of domination flow? And what are the alternatives to that? What are the models that maybe non-dominant models of regulation, of operation might look like, that we might be able to put forward to rebalance the imbalance that has been caused through that? And how do we challenge it in individual mindsets? Because I think it's really ingrained in a lot of men's mindsets, and actually not just men, because obviously patriarchy affects men and women, but like the acceptance of the idea that physical strength endows men with some kind of aptitude when it comes to governance or rule or status.
Such a difficult question to answer. Dennis Candiotti talks about the patriarchal bargain and how women are complicit in this too. I wonder what your thoughts are, Kubra.
Thank you so much, Miriam, and to highlighting this aspect of it, because what I think a lot of people are suffering under patriarchal systems, even men, and there are a lot of toxic masculinity hats. When we look into the statistics of how men actually evidently suffer under this, it is astonishing that they are not at the forefront of this.
Totally.
Yeah.
What a dominance model doesn't work for most men either, but it's
Exactly.
So crazy. But yeah, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
And today I was listening to a podcast with Colette Pigeon-Battle, and she is a climate activist. She's a climate justice activist from the US, from an ethnic minority there, and she said beautifully, one of the things we have to first do is acknowledge and apologize for the fact that we have taken too much. We have taken too much from nature, too much from other people living in other parts of the world, from people whose work has never been acknowledged as work. All of these people who have less power, simply because we had the possibility to take more, we took advantage of that. And while you were asking, Miriam, how could it be possible to live differently? Obviously we were asking it in a rhetorical question, because obviously it is possible. I had to think about, the other day I was at a mosque in Norwich, and there was a bit large shared plate where we all ate from together. And in COVID times, I haven't seen that for a really long time. But I realized I ate less because I only took as much as I really needed. And I was more aware of that there are other people who will eat from this plate. And And this was so symbolic to how we consume, how we live with one another, simply because we're allowed to take more. We take advantage of that because we're being told there's this underlying narrative of, you know, the homo economicus, which is provenly wrong, but all these bankers and finance people in the finance industry are being taught at university that there's this constructed homo economicus, that human being that always looks for mostly his own profit and will do anything to get the largest gain, which is not true. People, men, women, people who are gender fluid, people oftentimes are willing to take less if this will serve the greater good of their communities. But in our structures, this is not the narratives that we create around our society. So this is not how we design our law, design buildings, design culture, music, anything. It is around that narrative of take as much as you can within the legal framework, and if you can sort of, you know, wobble around that, do it.
Thank you. That's such an excellent way of looking at it. Now, I'm conscious of time, so I know we have huge reservations about break the bias. So let's imagine the slogan is actually break the barriers. And can we, for a screenshot that I promised Qaisra we would do, the symbol that they've chosen, which is this, you know, cross again. So if people want to turn cameras on and we'll get a screenshot for MACFEST's social media, that would be brilliant. So I don't know, I can't do it. So I hope someone's able to take a screenshot because I can't. But shall we pose, ladies? Like this?
Steve, just let everybody know once it's done.
Perfect, thank you so much. So now I really welcome audience questions. You can put your camera on and unmute yourself, or write them in the chat and I will read them out to the panelists, whatever you would prefer to do. We have a good 10 minutes. We're sorry that we had to lose Fawzia, who, as I said, was going to join another Zoom call, but she sends solidarity and tells us to stay united.
Maybe you can ask a question, Claire. I'm sure you will.
Sure. I have plenty. I can keep going all night, but I'm sure you wouldn't thank me for that. But yeah, I'm sure it'd be nice to hear another voice other than mine, but I'll give it half a minute and then I'll think of something else. I mean, one thing I did want to ask the speakers was about their writing lives, because I know you're, you know, working away on various media. So yeah, that's a question for you. How, you know, what do you seek to achieve through it? What's your writing routine like? And just tell us a bit more about your publications, anything really.
On this point, I would like to ask a question to Wardah, if that's okay. Wardah, you said you founded this platform for Muslim women to share their stories. Have you seen a change in how they were telling the stories? Have you seen, I mean, I'm sure that social media does also take its toll on how, you know, those kind of stories are being perceived, and the reactions they get might have become harsher over the last couple of years. How do people deal with it? And have you managed to maintain a platform where these voices can have sometimes conflicting, sometimes constructive discourses?
Yeah, so I believe when we started the Muslim Women Times, the first thing we were quick to tell women out there is this is a platform where you could be totally unapologetic about your views, about the stories that you share, and it's a safe space. And even though we share most of these stories on social media, we have a lot of women out there trying to, you know, play it safe, you know, trying to avoid the vitriol that comes from sharing their stories on a public platform. And then we have women who share their stories, but they want to be anonymous, and that's fine, actually. So we have had a lot of how do I put this? We've had a lot of attack from Muslim communities. We've had a lot of non-Muslims coming to question some of these experiences, some of the belief systems behind the struggles of Muslim women. And then we have Muslim men on the other hand, and as well as some Muslim women trying to take down the work we are doing, trying to discourage women from reading our platform, the stories on our platform, trying to dissuade women from going on there to read the experiences of Muslim men. We've had a lot of challenges, but we are happy that there are the responses we've gotten from Muslim women out there from different parts of the world are very encouraging. And a lot of women have actually reached out to us. They want to publish their stories. They want more of these stories. And I feel the Muslim Women Times is just a year old. We clocked 1 year in November 2020, and we still have a long way to go.
That's great. And we have a question in the chat. It's quite a difficult one, but a very interesting one. Perhaps we need some keywords or phrases that have universal meaning that we can take away. It is a challenge as we do all live in different situations, says Barbara Dresner, but has anyone got last words? Because Miriam, you asked such a provocative question. It was addressed very well by Kubra, but can we sort of sum up sort of some messages for people to take away? Any hopes for the future?
I mean, I'm gonna go. I sourced mine obviously from my faith framework, which is one that's very focused on the concept of unicity. We are all interconnected. There is no you and me or them. All of our freedom is dependent on the freedom of others. The wellness and balance of our world depends on that and of others. Climate change brings that home really, really evidently. Wars bring it home really evidently. You can't have a war over there that doesn't affect other parts of the world. You might be able to pretend that it doesn't, but it does. And so for me, I would put unity or unicity at the heart of the concept to hold on to, because that interconnectedness is that shared humanity that ultimately should make us aspire for change, not just for ourselves but for others. But also, contained within that is the reminder that there is no way of doing it just for ourselves. Actually, even if we wanted to, even if we wanted to, we actually can't. It's an interconnected world that we live in, whether we like it or not.
That's beautiful. I've got another really interesting question in the chat from Rana, who says, I'd like to hear the panel's thoughts on the bias around how the current Ukraine situation and the global narrative around the oppressor and victim, which is not, she says, to detract from the situation, and injustice taking place against Ukrainians. There have been wars, though, of course, against women of colour, and that's prevalent in society today. So just thoughts about the sorts of things that we were talking about earlier in relation to Ukraine, and also the really powerful things that Fawzia is saying from her perspective on Afghanistan.
Well, I think in a very minor way, we always see this pattern, even so, for instance, if we follow on how seriously digital hate was taken, it was only taken really seriously when white men were subjected to it as well. Up until then, it was like, oh, well, don't speak up. Oh, well, just shut off the internet. Or, well, this is what you get when you speak up, as a normalizing the reactions you would get simply for, in one way or another, criticizing a status quo. And so this is a very minor example, but it shows that there's a pattern that the closer you are to a certain norm, the more you will see that whatever injustice is happening to that group will be taken more seriously. So there's this beautiful quote by Rebecca, I forgot her name, and she says that every child, every person knows 1 comes after 0, 0 comes after 1, and then she goes on, and she says, and 0 is whiteness and proximity. So this is the norm, and everything is sort of, you know, your proximity to it is what defines your worth. And this is obviously during this conflict and this war has become again very, you know, obvious. And I've seen a lot of people very devastated to see how, oh, it is possible to react this way. Like, we were trying to get this kind of attention for years now, and we thought it just wasn't possible. Apparently it is possible, and very, very devastated to see that. And maybe this could be a communal lesson in how we should react to these kind of atrocities happening in the future and right now in other parts of the world. So I think it doesn't take anything away from the attention on Ukraine to highlight that this kind of solidarity wasn't shown in the past to other parts of the world where similar conflicts have happened, and that this should be a lesson to act differently in the future. And I hope that people do see this as a valuable criticism and not as, you know, a destructive criticism, as sometimes people try to delegitimize these kind of very important perspectives that will allow us hopefully to react differently in the future and state the obvious, to be honest.
That's a really good way of looking at it, that you wouldn't be doing whataboutism and detracting from Ukraine, but still trying to retain that intersectionality that we were talking about earlier. So I know that we're almost out of time. There is a comment from Aisha, I think responding to Barbara in the chat, who quotes Maya Angelou, and I think Fawzia also used this quote: when a woman stands up for herself, she stands up for all women. And I think that's, you know, a really great place for us to finish. And I just want to thank all our speakers, including Fawzia, who had to leave, Fawzia Koofi, Kubra Gumasay, Myriam Francois and Wardah Abbas. You've been absolutely brilliant. And of course, our guest speaker, Sharman Birtles, and to Qaisra Shahraz and MACFEST for hosting. I've really found tonight absolutely enlightening. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Claire, for hosting this.
Really great to meet you.
Thank you very much for having us. It was nice having this conversation with you all.
I've learned a lot from you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Claire, for hosting, as always, brilliant hosting. And thank you so much, Sharman, our Vice Lord Lieutenant, for joining us. I'm sure you're taking away lots with you, lots to think about, lots learning taking place. And thank you so much to our wonderful sisters. MashaAllah, what can I say? Such riveting, powerful conversations, fantastic contribution. You were all absolutely amazing. So glad that we hosted you, and especially a special day like today, an International Women's Day. You have paid indeed fantastic homage to it. So great stuff there. So I want to thank also our audience, our attendees, our committed audience who attend regularly. I'm 100% sure that you will echo what I've said, that it's been a riveting evening. So many poignant, riveting conversations by an amazing panelist. So next, what have we got for you? Remember, we are now into March, our Women's Festival. So what we have tomorrow, I don't know if you live in Manchester or if you're able to join us. We have a live event at Central Library, and it's hosted by the Centre for New Writing, University of Manchester, with 3 amazing women poets. So that is tomorrow live. And then the next day, Steve, if you could add the next slide, please. On Thursday, we take you to another amazing digital panel. I hope you will enjoy us. And guess what? It's on the topic of food, women empowerment, and Malaysian cuisine. We have a real feast for you. So it's going to be fantastic. So thank you so much once again, and good night, and assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. Well done, ladies.
Wa alaikum salam.